In the history of global weaponry, there are models created not by the laws of logic, but in spite of them. Before you is the FG-42, or the paratrooper rifle model 1942. This device is often called the most unusual and advanced small arm of World War II. Emerging as a direct response to the catastrophic losses of German paratroopers during the invasion of Crete, it was designed to replace everything at once: a precise sniper rifle, a light submachine gun, and a powerful light machine gun. Designer Ludwig Stange achieved the impossible. He managed to tame the fury of the heavy 7.92 by 57 millimeter rifle cartridge inside a compact body weighing just over 4 kilograms. Look at this silhouette: a magazine attached on the left, an aggressive grip angle, and a futuristic muzzle brake. The FG-42 looked like an alien from the future compared to the classic wooden carbines of that era. It featured a unique bolt system that operated on different principles depending on the fire mode, a technical solution still considered a pinnacle of firearms engineering. Today, we will detail how this steel beast was created, what its mechanical madness consisted of, and why, despite being an engineering triumph, the FG-42 could never change the course of the war. On May 12, 1941, the pre-dawn twilight over Greek airfields was pierced by the roar of hundreds of engines. Operation Mercury was intended as the triumphant crown of the German blitzkrieg, the first large-scale island seizure in history carried out exclusively by airborne forces. But for the elite paratroopers of the Luftwaffe's 7th Flieger Division, this flight into the unknown became a one-way trip. In newsreels from those years, the paratroopers looked flawless, but the reality hidden behind their jump was catastrophic. The design of their RZ parachutes, for all its merits, contained a fatal engineering flaw. The single suspension point was located behind the back near the shoulder blades. This meant that in free fall, the soldier hung face down at an angle of nearly 45 degrees, turning into a helpless target unable to control the direction of descent. But the most terrifying detail of this jump was the unarmed state. Due to the harsh landing method, effectively on all fours with a heavy impact on rocky soil, a paratrooper could carry nothing heavier than a Luger P08 pistol or a compact MP40. All primary weaponry, including powerful Mauser 98K carbines and machine guns, was dropped separately in heavy containers. When the sky over Crete bloomed with thousands of canopies, New Zealand and British snipers saw not formidable warriors, but unarmed acrobats. The island turned into a shooting gallery. German soldiers flailed in the air, watching their comrades go silent before even touching the ground, unable to return aimed fire from below. Those who managed to land alive found themselves in hell. They had to crawl under a storm of lead for hundreds of meters toward the coveted weapon crates marked with colored stripes. Every minute of this path cost hundreds of lives. Soldiers pressed into the dusty earth, feeling, by their own admission, oppressive impotence. They were the best of the best, the Reich's elite, but in those decisive minutes, their professionalism was worthless without rifles. Losses were colossal. Over 3,000 paratroopers remained forever in the olive groves of Crete. This bloodbath was not just a tactical lesson, but a verdict on the existing armament system. It became clear a paratrooper desperately needed a fundamentally new tool, a powerful, compact, and universal rifle that would be on him at the moment of the jump and allow him to join the fight before his feet touched the scorching rocks. Thus, the tragedy on Crete opened the way for the creation of the legendary FG-42. When the bloody dust over Crete settled, a heavy silence reigned in the offices of the Reich Air Ministry, soon replaced by fury. The Luftwaffe command was not going to accept that their elite was being gunned down like targets in a gallery due to technical limitations. The demand for industry, formulated following Operation Mercury, sounded not just ambitious, it seemed insane. The military required a universal weapon chambered for the powerful 7.92 by 57 millimeter rifle round that would be shorter than a meter, weigh as much as a standard carbine, fire single shots with sniper accuracy, and bursts like a full machine gun. The Army Ordnance Department, HWAA, simply laughed at this request, calling it a technical utopia, and refused to fund Goering's whims. But it was this bureaucratic barrier and the arrogance of Army officials that launched one of the most daring engineering projects in history. Ludwig Stange, lead designer at Rheinmetall Borsig, took this challenge not as a burden but as a chance to shatter all existing dogmas of gun-making. He understood that a classic rifle layout would not work here. To squeeze the power of a machine gun into the dimensions of a carbine, he had to literally reinvent firearm architecture. Stange began by straightening the rifle. In those days, most rifles had a curved stock, which caused the muzzle to climb during fire. Stange placed the stock in a straight line with the axis of the barrel. This was a revolutionary decision. Now the recoil impulse went straight into the shoulder, minimizing muzzle rise and allowing the shooter to control the weapon even during automatic fire.
But the real black magic of Stange's engineering lay in the magazine placement. To shorten the receiver as much as possible and allow the paratrooper to hug the ground as tightly as possible, he moved the magazine well to the left side. This gave the FG-42 that very predatory, asymmetrical silhouette that still excites the imagination of collectors. The 20-round magazine sticking out sideways allowed the feed mechanism to work faster and more reliably, and the soldier to change it without taking his eyes off the target. Stange approached the task with an aesthetic of futurism. The pistol grip of the first model was set at an unusual, almost extreme angle of 120 degrees. This was not a design flourish. Such geometry was dictated by the specifics of paratrooper combat. A soldier had to be able to fire while still in the air, in the harness, or immediately after landing from the most awkward positions. Every detail of the FG-42 carried a double load. The four-sided spike bayonet in the stowed position simply flipped and hid under the barrel, becoming part of the guide. The folding bipods, made of light metal, turned into a kind of handguard when folded. The internal mechanism of the rifle resembled a complex clockwork. Stange implemented a variable bolt locking system, a solution still considered the peak of firearms thought. In semi-auto, the bolt closed tightly, ensuring perfect accuracy for the first shot, like a sporting rifle. But as soon as the shooter flipped the switch to auto, the system began operating from an open bolt, like a machine gun. This prevented the barrel from overheating and the risk of a cook-off, where a round fires itself in a glowing chamber. To tame the energy of the Mauser round, Stange hid a powerful recoil buffer inside the stock, which turned a sharp kick into a soft push. Louis Stange's work was an act of pure engineering arrogance in the best sense of the word. He ignored all industrial complaints about manufacturing complexity and all mockery from Army experts. He was creating a tool for supermen, for those who jump into the abyss, and this weapon had to match their level. When the first prototype was presented to the commission, the military was stunned. Before them lay a device that looked like an artifact from the future, weighed just over 4 kilograms, yet possessed firepower capable of stopping a whole platoon's advance. Stange proved that the line between the possible and impossible is merely a matter of the audacity of design thought.
When Louis Stange presented the blueprints for the FG-42, many experienced gunsmiths considered them technical madness. The main problem for any automatic weapon using a powerful cartridge is the conflict between accuracy and overheating. Stange solved this dilemma with a system that would later be called the double life of the bolt. It was a mechanical split personality embodied in steel, and that is precisely what made the rifle unique. In standard rifles, the bolt is always closed before firing. This is vital for accuracy. When you pull the trigger, only a light firing pin moves inside. In machine guns, it's the opposite. The bolt is open and in the rear position before firing. This is needed for cooling. Between bursts, air passes freely through the barrel, preventing a round in the chamber from heating up to the point of spontaneous explosion. Stange decided that a paratrooper shouldn't have to choose one or the other. His FG-42 worked in both modes. When a soldier moved the safety switch to the semi-auto position, the rifle behaved like a precision instrument. The bolt chambered around and locked tight. Pulling the trigger caused a surgical strike on the primer, and the bullet flew true to the target. But if the lever was switched to automatic mode, the mechanics of the weapon transformed. Now, after every shot, the bolt did not return forward, but stopped in the rear position. The barrel breathed, and the next shot occurred only when the massive bolt carrier under spring tension flew forward, stripped around, and immediately struck its primer. It was complex and expensive to produce, but incredibly effective. However, taming the beast did not end there. The energy of the 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser round was excessive for such a light weapon. At a rate of 900 rounds per minute, the rifle should have literally jumped out of one's hands, turning into an uncontrollable jackhammer. To prevent this, Stange integrated a highly complex damping system. Inside the stock was a massive recoil buffer with a powerful spring. It worked like a racing car's shock absorber, absorbing the sharp impact of the bolt carrier and stretching it out over time. This system was complemented by a muzzle brake compensator at the end of the barrel. It didn't just suppress the flash, but redirected powder gases to push the muzzle forward and down, compensating for natural climb. As a result, the paratrooper held a handheld hurricane that could be fired with one hand, pressing the stock to the hip. But there was a price for this technical triumph. The mechanics were so tight and precise that the smallest grain of dirt or poor lubrication in freezing conditions could turn this engineering masterpiece into a useless piece of metal. Soldiers who first picked up the FG-42 felt mixed emotions. On one hand, there was incredible power. The bullet confidently pierced brick walls and steel helmets at distances where standard submachine guns were useless. On the other, automatic fire turned the 20-round magazine into an empty tin can in just 1.3 seconds. You fire it, and you're holding a red-hot poker, veterans said. The barrel heated so quickly that the handguard burned palms, and powder gases from the gas block located directly under the barrel hit the face if held incorrectly. This was a weapon that demanded the same high level of qualification from the soldier as that of its creator. It did not forgive mistakes, but in the hands of a master, it became the most dangerous tool on the World War II battlefield. While Ludwig Stange was subduing the fury of the rifle cartridge in his blueprints, a battle was erupting in Berlin that rivaled the front lines in intensity. The creation of the FG-42 became the epicenter of a clash between two worlds, the ambitious but detached world of the Luftwaffe and the conservative, pragmatic world of the army, Wehrmacht. In staff corridors, the paratrooper rifle project quickly earned a contemptuous nickname, Göring's Scam. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarshal and the number 2 in the state, always sought to make his air force a state within a state. The Luftwaffe had its own divisions, its own tanks, and even its own anti-aircraft corps. The only thing they lacked for total prestige was their own unique small arm that would emphasize the elite status of the Green Devils. For Göring, the FG-42 was a matter of personal image and political weight. However, the Army Ordnance Department, Heereswaffenamt, saw the situation differently. Wehrmacht generals viewed the project as a flagrant example of wastefulness and duplication of effort. The conflict boiled down to a fundamental question: what should the cartridge of the future be? Army circles had already bet on the intermediate 7.92 by 33 mm quartz round. It was shorter and weaker, but allowed for the creation of light, cheap assault rifles that even an untrained recruit could fire reliably. The Army was pushing its own project, the future Sturmgewehr 44. When the airmen presented their own rifle under a powerful round capable of automatic fire, the Army leadership was furious. They argued to Hitler that the FG-42 was an engineering dead end, too complex, too expensive, and totally unsuitable for the conditions of total war. "Why do we need this golden toy of the Luftwaffe?" they whispered in headquarters. "It requires 86 hours of work on precision machines, while our Sturmgewehr can be stamped in factories that make cooking pots." And there was truth in those words. Manufacturing the receiver of the first FG-42 model required rare grades of nickel-chrome molybdenum steel, which were in short supply. Each rifle became golden, not just in complexity, but in cost. Army officials openly sabotaged the project, refusing material supplies and forbidding the use of factories under their command.
Goering, however, was not used to backing down. Lacking army support, he ordered development to proceed through the Air Ministry, using aviation plants and his department's budgets. This led to an absurd situation. In one warring country, two different concepts of automatic weapons were developed simultaneously, competing for the same resources. Stange's project survived only thanks to Iron Herman's patronage, but even his influence wasn't enough to launch mass production. The situation reached the point of absurdity. When Hitler first heard of the FG-42, influenced by army generals, he banned its production. The Führer was told the rifle had unbearable recoil and its cartridge was too powerful for automatic fire. The FG-42 might have remained just a few dozen prototypes if not for chance and the fanaticism of German paratroopers. Soldiers who tested pre-production samples refused to give them back. For them, this rifle was a matter of survival. The turning point came in September 1943, when the world shuddered at the daring news. Mussolini had been rescued from an impregnable mountain fortress. Photos of Scorzeni's paratroopers with futuristic rifles flooded the newspapers. It was a Luftwaffe triumph. Hitler, who loved grand gestures and wonder weapons, immediately changed his mind. He personally ordered the production of the FG-42 to begin, ignoring Wehrmacht protests. But the bureaucratic victory proved Pyrrhic. Precious time, nearly 2 years, had been lost in endless debates and approvals. The Rheinmetall-Borsig plant, busy producing aircraft cannons, could not spare lines for rifles. The contract was handed to the Krieghoff firm, which heroically tried to set up production of the complex mechanism under conditions where German skies already belonged to Allied aircraft. Goering's scam defeated the common sense of generals, but lost to ruthless time. The FG-42 was born in labs as a masterpiece, but entered the battlefield when Germany needed not masterpieces, but millions of simple, cheap hammers. By 1944, a unique situation developed on the battlefields of World War II. Two technical geniuses, two different views on the future of infantry, clashed in a final battle of concepts. On one side stood the FG-42, aristocratic, complex, and uncompromising, the golden toy of the Luftwaffe. On the other, the Sturmgewehr 44, the brainchild of Hugo Schmeisser, which soldiers nicknamed the simple and clear Hammer. This wasn't just an argument over calibers, it was a battle between two different philosophies of warfare. The FG-42 was created as a tool of individual mastery. At its core lay engineering maximalism. Ludwig Stange designed a weapon for titans, perfectly trained paratroopers who had to be able to do everything. It was an orchestra rifle. It allowed for sniper fire at 800 meters, suppressed machine gun nests with bursts, and could go into a bayonet charge. In it, one felt the old-school spirit where every shot must be lethal and the weapon a work of art. The 7.92 by 57 millimeter Mauser round gave colossal energy, allowing it to pierce brick walls and light armor, but it also made the FG-42 a hostage of its own power. The STG-44 offered something entirely different. Schmeisser understood what the Luftwaffe refused to admit. Modern combat is not a duel of snipers, but an avalanche of fire at short ranges. His Sturmgewehr used the intermediate 7.92 by 33 millimeter Kurz round. It was weaker than the Mauser one, but that was the genius of the concept. Less recoil, higher accuracy. Less cartridge weight, more ammunition for the soldier.
The STG-44 was a weapon of the era of total war, created to be mastered by a yesterday's mobilized worker in a couple of hours. Its receiver was made from stamping from cheap sheet steel, allowing assault rifles to be produced by the hundreds of thousands. The contrast was striking. The FG-42 demanded iron discipline from the shooter. At a rate of 900 rounds per minute, an inexperienced soldier would just spray blindly, emptying the magazine in a second. The STG-44, however, purred in the hands obediently and predictably, allowing rounds to be put on target in short bursts without dislocating a shoulder. While the FG-42 remained an elite scalpel for surgical operations, the STG-44 became the prototype for all modern assault rifles, including the future AK-47. In Wehrmacht headquarters, the FG-42 was openly mocked. Why spend resources on one rifle for a paratrooper if for the same money we can arm 5 infantrymen with Sturmgewehrs? This logic of logistics was relentless. The FG-42 was too good for a world sliding into the abyss of ruin. It required precision machines, rare alloys, and hours of hand-fitting. The STG-44, meanwhile, could be assembled in any factory that previously made typewriters. In this fight, the hammer won. Logistics and mass production proved more important than individual perfection. But even losing in numbers, the FG-42 kept the last word in charisma and engineering audacity. If the STG-44 showed how the world would fight for the next half-century, the FG-42 showed the heights human genius could reach if tasked with the impossible. It was a confrontation of romanticism and pragmatism, where romanticism died in the mud of trenches, leaving behind only the legend of a steel beast with wings. The winter of 1944 was the moment when Louis Stange's elegant engineering theories met the icy breath of reality in the Eifel Mountains and the snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. During Operation Watch on the Rhine, the German command threw its last quality reserves into battle, including the 2nd Parachute Regiment of the Luftwaffe. It was here that the modernized version of the rifle, the FG-42/2, earned its most formidable and terrifying nickname. American soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division, pinned down in frozen foxholes near Bastogne, began reporting to HQ about a strange, demonic sound coming from the German positions. It wasn't the usual dry crack of carbines or the steady thud of machine guns. It was a continuous, heavy, mechanical roar, resembling a giant chainsaw biting into frozen wood. In the conditions of dense forest and limited visibility, the FG-42 revealed its true, beastly nature. Thanks to the integral bipod and powerful cartridge, paratroopers could deliver aimed fire through tree trunks and light cover that were usually considered safe from smaller caliber bullets. The Devil's Saw didn't just fire, it literally cut lanes through the advancing Allied formations. A weapon originally intended for rapid descents from the sky suddenly turned into an ideal tool for positional defense. A paratrooper armed with such a rifle possessed the firepower of an entire squad, allowing the Germans to hold narrow mountain roads and forest trails with small groups, creating the illusion of whole battalions being present. However, the Ardennes also exposed those weaknesses of the masterpiece that no modernization could eliminate. The massive muzzle flash, reaching 1.5 meters in length, instantly turned the shooter into a living target in the winter twilight. After every burst, the paratrooper had to frantically change positions to avoid becoming a target for American mortar teams. The blast of the shot was so intense that in enclosed spaces of forest bunkers, it caused temporary hearing loss in the soldiers themselves. Nonetheless, it was in these battles that the FG-42 earned its reputation as the most dangerous and unpredictable trophy hunted by scouts on both sides. In the spring of 1945, the story of the FG-42 reached its tragic and inevitable finale. The last surviving rifles found themselves at the very epicenter of the Battle of Berlin. In those days, the eliteness of units no longer mattered. Everyone was thrown into the fight for every street. Paratroopers from the Nordland Division and remnants of Luftwaffe parachute units used the FG-42 in city labyrinths where engagement distances dropped to a few meters. In the suffocating smoke of burning buildings and the concrete dust of ruins, the rifle became a full participant in the drama's final act. The last documented shots of the demon echoed at the very walls of the Reichstag, where soldiers desperately tried to stop an avalanche of T-34 tanks using the integrated grenade launchers and the four-sided bayonets of their rifles. It was the agony of technological perfection rendered powerless against the scale of history.